You'll recall that earlier last week, the Washington Post announced they would not, in fact, put forth an endorsement of Kamala Harris. Now, as pro forma, everyone knows that the staff of the Washington Post editorial board loves Kamala Harris, carries around a drool cup for Kamala Harris, spends their evenings exploring Kamala Harris's colon with their heads. Everyone knows this. Okay, the Washington Post hasn't exactly been shy about their support of Kamala Harris. Their in-house conservative columnist is Jennifer Rubin. Okay, so everyone knows where they stand. Jeff Bezos, however, he said, we're not going to put forth an endorsement because guess what? We're a newspaper, which means we do news on paper. And that means that probably we should stick to, covering the news. So he actually was forced to put out a statement personally. It's called The Hard Truth. Americans Don't Trust the News Media. And I got to say, props to Jeff Bezos. And it's worth reading what he writes because at least Jeff Bezos gets it. He gets it. He understands the vast trust gap that has been established because of places like the New York Times seeking to shut down dissent, or CNN, which suggests, again, Mehdi Hasan can call half of America Nazis, but if Ryan Gerdusky makes a joke about beepers, bam, get out of here, Ryan. Here is Jeff Bezos, quote, in the annual public surveys about trust and reputation, journalists and the media have regularly fallen near the very bottom, often just above Congress. But in this year's Gallup poll, we have managed to fall below Congress. Our profession is now the least trusted of all. Something we are doing is clearly not working. Let me give an analogy. Voting machines must meet two requirements. They must count the vote accurately, and people must believe they count the vote accurately. The second requirement is distinct from and just as important as the first. Likewise with newspapers. We must be accurate and we must be believed to be accurate. It's a bitter pill to swallow, but we are failing on the second requirement. I'll say they're failing also on the first requirement, that half of their reporting is trash, but at least Bezos gets the second part right. Because most people believe the media is biased. Anyone who doesn't see this is paying scant attention to reality, and those who fight reality lose. Reality is an undefeated champion. It would be easy to blame others for our long and continuing fall in credibility, and therefore decline in impact, but a victim mentality will not help. Complaining is not a strategy. We must work harder to control what we can control to increase our credibility. Presidential endorsements do nothing to tip the scales of an election. No undecided voters in Pennsylvania are going to say, I'm going with newspaper A's endorsement. None. What presidential endorsements actually do is create a perception of bias, a perception of non-independence. Ending them is a principled decision, and it's the right one. Eugene Meyer, publisher of the Washington Post from 1933 to 1946, thought the same, and he was right. By itself, declining to endorse presidential candidates is not enough to move us very far up the trust scale, but it's a meaningful step in the right direction. I wish we had made the change earlier than we did, in a moment further from the election and the emotions around it. That was inadequate planning and not some intentional strategy. Okay, now, he has been accused of basically bending over backwards because he is afraid that Donald Trump is going to come into office and then regulate Blue Origin. And he says that's not true. He says, I would like to be clear, no quid pro quo of any kind is at work here. Neither campaign nor candidate was consulted or informed at any level or in any way about this decision. It was made entirely internally. When it comes to the appearance of conflict, I'm not an ideal owner of the Post. Every day, somewhere, some Amazon executive or Blue Origin executive or someone from other philanthropies and companies I own or invest in is meeting with government officials. I once wrote that the Post is a complexifier for me. It is, but it turns out I'm also a complexifier for the Post. He says lack of credibility isn't unique to the Post. Our brethren newspapers have the same issue. And it's not a problem only for media, but for the nation. Many people are turning to off-the-cuff podcasts, inaccurate social media posts, and other unverified news sources, which can quickly spread misinformation and deepen divisions. The Washington Post and New York Times win prizes, but increasingly we talk only to a certain elite. Now, again, the part that Bezos is not getting to here is that it is not just a matter of the editorial pages. It is also a matter of the reporting. And I present to you as Exhibit A the fact that the New York Times sent one of its top reporters to me with propaganda from Media Matters in hand in an attempt to cudgel YouTube into shutting down shows like this one. So it ain't just about the perception of bias. The perception of bias is not just about the editorial board, it's about the entire newspaper. And that perception is accurate. These newspapers are, in fact, biased in their content. That perception is not coming from nowhere, but at least Bezos is admitting it. Okay, but here is the problem. He then gets clubbed over the head, just absolutely clubbed. 2 more members of the editorial board at the Washington Post have now resigned after the paper announced it was not endorsing a candidate for president. Molly Roberts is one of those members of the editorial board. She said, let's say that an editorial board has had for decades a long practice of not endorsing candidates for president. This would be an election to reverse that position and take a stand. That the Washington Post editorial board has been forced to do the opposite, dishonors our values and robs us of our purpose. To be very clear, the decision not to endorse this election was not the editorial board's. It was, you can read the reporting, Jeff Bezos's. By registering my dissent, I don't intend to impugn the conduct of my colleagues, all of whom were put in nearly impossible positions. And then she goes on to talk about how terrible it is and how Donald Trump is not yet a dictator, but he is becoming closer to a dictator. Democracy dies in darkness. And of course, the Washington Post has apparently lost a couple 100,000 subscribers, which is about 8% of the subscriber base of the entire newspaper. Now, why is that? The answer is because the Washington Post has become a left-wing fan club. That is the reason they bleed subscribers when they say they're not going to endorse Kamala Harris. That's why. Because there were no people in the middle or on the right subscribing to the Washington Post. It has become the Washington Compost. It is a compost heap. It is trash. Its reporting on everything from domestic politics to foreign policy is a disaster area, propagandistic ownership by the left. But when Bezos attempts to fix any of it, rebellion occurs. And this is the nature of our media environment. Well, folks, with things so heated, we know we have a big election coming up. And let me tell you, there is a lot at stake. And if Kamala Harris gets into office, well, that's like throwing gas on a dumpster fire that's already visible from space. Here's what you can do. Protect your savings by diversifying now into gold from my friends at Birch Gold. That's correct. For millennia, gold has stood firm in the face of greedy governments, economic upheavals, and global strife. It can protect you now. Birch Gold will help you convert an IRA or 401k into an IRA in physical gold. And the best news, it doesn't cost you a penny out of pocket. Think about this for a second. In the past 4 years, while the buying power of the US dollar has declined faster than CNN's ratings, the price of gold has skyrocketed 40%. Is that a coincidence? No. So here's what you need to do. Text Ben to 989898. You'll get your free info kit on gold, and then you can diversify. As the exclusive gold partner of the Daily Wire for the past 8 years, you can trust Birch Gold, as I do, to protect your savings. Don't wait for the election results to start thinking about your financial future. Text Ben to the number 989898 for your free info kit today. That's Ben to the number 989898. Get all of your questions answered by my friends over at Birch Gold, and then when you're ready to invest, they're the people to talk to. Text Ben to 989898 to get started today. So if that's the way the media environment is, if these are all left-wing outlets masquerading as objective news outlets, now you understand why the New York Times is doing what it's doing. Why MSNBC will attempt to pressure, again, YouTube, places like it, into cutting off podcasts like mine or like Joe Rogan's or anybody else's. The goal is to shut off the competition, because if you can't beat the competition, you have to destroy the competition. That's what's going on. That's the October, and that is a long-standing mission. That is a long-standing mission of all of these left-wing pseudo-journalistic outfits. And it is quite terrible. Well, all of this reeks of alarm, right? If all these places thought that Kamala Harris was winning handily, none of this would be happening. I mean, sure, there would still be soft pushes. You'd still have the New York Times unleashing, back in the old days, Kevin Roose to tweet about how Facebook was being too nice to the Daily Wire. Sure, that would still be happening. But if they thought that Kamala Harris was winning, they'd be a lot more sanguine about things. They'd be a lot more content with the direction of American politics. They are not. They are freaking out. They are freaking out. You can see the freak out happening in real time. So, for example, Whoopi Goldberg over at The View, who is sort of the id of the Democratic Party. Right? If the superego of the Democratic Party is somebody like Pete Buttigieg, then Whoopi Goldberg is the id. Just raging all the time. Full-time rage from Whoopi Goldberg. So here she is. She says you can't vote for Donald Trump because he's going to break up interracial marriages, which is weird because, no, like not even remotely close. But okay, Whoopi, go for it.
He's not going to, say, oh, you're with a white guy, I'm going to keep you from being deported. No, he's going to deport you and put the white guy with someone else. The man is out there.
So her idea is that if Donald Trump wants to end illegal immigration and deport many illegal immigrants, that's so he can marry a white person to another white person. She's psychotic. Are you tired of the lies and the twists of the mainstream media talking points? Yeah, me too. Join me in my newest series, Fact, where I dismantle and bring truth to this tiring mainstream agenda.